Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and Apple released new products today. We'll also talk about iOS 27, of course what to expect with iOS 26, and much more. This is your weekly Apple news update for the week of March 16th, 2026. Apple released new AirPods Max 2 today. They basically look the same as what we have already. They have similar colors as well, but they now have the H2 chipset. It has improved sound, a new high dynamic range amplifier, better active noise cancellation along with adaptive audio, conversational awareness, voice isolation, and live translation. The digital crown can oddly also be used to take photos, so if you want to use it for a shutter button, you can do that. You'll see they're listed here. They'll be available to order on 3/25 or March 25th and available early next month. One thing to note about them is if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see that they require iOS 26.4. So you'll see here, if we scroll up just a little bit, they mention iOS 26.4 multiple times throughout, so you'll need that. So we can expect that to release sometime around that time frame. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Also today, Apple announced that it acquired Motion VFX. I've been using Motion VFX for years with all the graphics you see in my video. They're basically plugins and different things you can add to Final Cut Pro as well as DaVinci Resolve and others so that you can have motion graphics throughout. They announced today that they're being acquired by Apple. So you'll see it says our biggest edit yet, Motion VFX joins Apple. So that's some huge news. Maybe it will be part of Creator Studio. We don't know, but that would be great to see everything sort of transition over to Creator Studio, including the iPad, as the iPad doesn't have a ton of plugins as well. So being able to edit on the go, maybe with everything from there, will be great. So we'll have to wait and see what they do with that. But again, they acquired them today, and I'm sure we'll see that in the near future. Also last night, Apple actually won an Oscar for the F1 film for the best sound. If you haven't seen the movie yet, even if you don't like F1 or racing in general, the sound and music is one of the best parts of it. So the award doesn't really surprise me, and overall the film is pretty great. So if you haven't checked it out, be sure to check it out on Apple TV, where you can see it here. And of course, it will load in just a second, as it's a little bit slow for some reason today. Some issues with my internet, it seems. And you'll see here under the Apple TV that it's an Oscar award winner. So again, F1, if you haven't seen it, if you already have Apple TV, at least check it out for the sound itself. Apple also celebrated its first 50th year anniversary celebration at the Grand Central Terminal this past week, but it's now said that they plan to have gatherings around the world for celebration. So you'll see here, Apple hosts 50th anniversary celebrations around the world. They had Alicia Keys on stage, and then of course they'll have many more in the near future. So I can't wait to see what they do here. Hopefully there'll be some closer to me in the Charlotte area, but we'll have to wait and see what they do. Late last year, we heard that chief designer over iOS 26 and Liquid Glass had actually left for Meta. Apple last week updated its leadership page, and you can see that here. So if we scroll down, you can see who took over. So we'll keep scrolling, and you'll see here, Steve LeMay is now the Vice President of Human Interface Design. In addition to this, they also added Molly Anderson, who's now the Vice President of Industrial Design. That's sort of a position that Johnny Ive had before, and so they've added those additions here. Now, Steve LeMay is still highly involved and invested in Liquid Glass. We'll talk more about that in a moment. They also added Jennifer Newstead, who's Senior Vice President and General Counsel now. Now, I did want to mention some deals this week, and AirPods Pro 3 seem to be on discount again for $209.99 from Apple on Amazon. So a great deal there. Also, there's iPad M3s available, things like that. Many of the old iPads that basically were discontinued last week are now on discount, including the MacBook Air. So I'll link a bunch of those in the description below if you want to check them out. When it comes to releases, well, Apple released some updates last week showing they still care about older devices. If we go to Apple's release website, and on Apple's release website, you'll see that they released iOS 16.7.15 along with the iPad version, and then iOS 15.8.7 along with the iPad version as well. This supports phones all the way back to the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, as well as older iPods and much more. So be sure to install this if you have one of those versions, as that's a major security update that's fairly important. As far as other releases, well, we're still waiting for iOS 26.4 Beta 5 or RC or release candidate. So based on what we've seen before, that could be sometime later today or sometime this week. Typically, Apple releases the RC or release candidate as the final version that's released to developers and public beta testers before it releases to the public. If they do release it this week, we can expect a public release sometime around the 23rd or 24th. So that's what we could expect, but if we have a Beta 5 this week, we could see the RC next week and then a public release around the end of March. We don't have specific dates, but this is typically what Apple does. After that, I would expect iOS 26.5 Beta 1, and maybe finally we'll see some Siri 2.0 updates. But again, there's no guarantee of this. Apple hasn't announced it. They've just said it's coming later this year. And that could be coming with iOS 27. That's going to be shown for the first time in June at WWDC 2026. We typically see that around the second week of June, maybe around June 8th or 9th. And then, of course, we'll have betas throughout the summer with a public release sometime in September around the next iPhone 18 launch. So that's what we can expect as far as updates this week. Hopefully we'll see something very soon. And when it comes to iOS 27, it seems that it is truly focused on bugs and stability this year. While we do expect some features, very little has leaked whatsoever, and we don't expect many hundreds of features like iOS 26 or iOS 18. However, we do expect Siri 2.0 updates with integration within the OS, some health features, some other things maybe with the calendar and a few other things throughout the OS. But again, tying back to Siri 2.0 with sort of context aware, it should know what's on your screen and all be on device and then help you process that data. The biggest news of the week, though, is Apple is supposedly releasing a liquid glass slider. This is according to Mark Gurman in his Power On newsletter for the weekend. He said it couldn't be pulled off in iOS 26 due to engineering reasons, but maybe we'll see it in the next version. So with iOS 27, maybe we'll go under display and brightness, and then we'll have a slider for liquid glass. We'll change it not only from clear to tinted, but how much glass you want. If you don't want it at all, it should be easy to turn it off. So I actually like a lot of liquid glass, what they showed in the first version at WWDC, but then we don't really have much of that. So maybe we'll see more or less of it, but we'll have to wait and see. Also, liquid glass is not going anywhere, as the head of design, Steve LeMay, was a big part of it. However, he is also a user interface person, and I would expect many improvements there this year. So I wouldn't expect any changes as far as the overall design theme, as that's Apple's design theme going forward. And many people who are not happy with liquid glass seem to think most people don't like it, but actually in polls and things I've run online, most people actually really like liquid glass. So there's definitely some who would like to turn it off, and having a slider there later with iOS 27 I think would be welcome. Now, we do expect some changes with iOS 27 this year to support better multitasking. This would specifically be for the iPhone Fold, though, and may not carry back to the regular iPhone 18 model. We don't know this for sure, but Mark Gurman also said last week to expect the upcoming iPhone Fold to have an iPad-style multitasking ability. So typically with foldable phones, you'll have some sort of multitasking, and we could see this with the upcoming Fold. Also, the display for the upcoming iPhone Fold is nearing production, as Apple has to get millions of devices ready by September, typically for release. Instant Digital on Weibo has said that Samsung, who makes this display as well as the upcoming iPhone Fold display, will begin production in May. It takes months to get everything up and running, get all the components, get the hardware ready, and so that makes sense. Typically around May or June, we have quite a few of them in production, so they can release in September with millions of them available. Now, with the iPhone 18 Pro and 18 Pro Max, we do expect the dynamic island to remain. However, many thought for sure that the iPhone 17e would have the dynamic island, and it doesn't. It seems the same is true with the iPhone 18 Pro models, as recent rumors suggested a smaller dynamic island. However, Digital Chat Station on Weibo has said that the dynamic island will remain unchanged for the most part. So we have heard that they would use a thinner sort of Face ID sensor, but it seems the dynamic island will stay the same. I would believe this based on rumors about the 17e, but we'll have to wait and see. Also, iPhone 18 Pro Max is again rumored to be slightly thicker and heavier than the iPhone 17 Pro Max by about 0.5 millimeter or so. Ice Universe on Weibo has said that the phone would come in at 8.8 millimeters thin and also weigh over 240 grams, making it the heaviest iPhone since the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which was stainless steel and a heavier material. So that would make sense if they're making more room for a larger battery, maybe some upgraded cameras or something like that. Now, good news is Ming Chi Kuo is saying that the price of the iPhone 18 Pro models is expected to stay the same. So despite the issues with RAM and different storage costs, it seems like Apple will keep the price the same and maybe eat some of that cost theirself. Now, last week we got the M5 updates to the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro, but later this year we should be getting a much bigger update according to Mark Gurman. Apple is planning to launch a touchscreen MacBook Pro that has a redesigned chassis and uses an OLED display. Mark Gurman has also said this will be part of a new Ultra lineup or higher price point lineup that will not replace the current MacBook Pros, but sit above them in the lineup. So we could get sort of an Ultra, maybe an iPhone Ultra to go along with that, with the Fold. We don't really know exactly, but it seems that's what we can expect later this year, as macOS is said to incorporate touchscreen features for that update. Some have also said that the next MacBook Neo could feature touch support, first mentioned by Ming Chi Kuo, but now Mark Gurman is saying that's not going to happen. Of course, I would expect the touchscreen to come to the Macs first, and then roll out to the older devices after that, trickle down to the MacBook Air, and then of course everything else. There's also more Macs coming later this year, and according to Mark Gurman, we should see an updated Mac Studio, Mac Mini, and iMac with refreshed color palette. So hopefully we'll see all of that by the end of the year, and one of the biggest releases this year that I've seen in a long time. So Apple's releasing a ton of products pretty quickly. And to go along with the new MacBook Ultra, AirPods are also said to get sort of the Ultra treatment. This would basically be AirPods that are said to have cameras with visual intelligence support, but they would be coming later this year. So those could go along with the Ultra lineup just being a higher end version of headphones, but we don't really know what to expect other than maybe that camera with Apple Intelligence. Apple is already working on an iPhone 18e as well, and according to Fixed Focus Digital on Weibo, it basically has the same design already, and it's been finalized. Hopefully they'll bring the Dynamic Island and 120Hz ProMotion, but thankfully the 17e actually brought the new PWM feature under accessibility, display, and text size. So that helps when looking at OLED displays, turns it off entirely, and makes it much easier to use the display. Apple is also working to print more devices in the future with 3D printing like they have with some Apple Watches already. Apple is working to use 3D print technology for the full enclosure of the devices to save on aluminum, but also increase efficiency according to Mark Gurman. So we could see more 3D printed devices in the near future when it comes to the overall chassis and everything else, as 3D printing metal gets more and more sort of precise and sort of more refined at this point. Of course, we're waiting for new HomePod devices, and it seems like they've been delayed quite a bit. And we already expected a HomePod Mini 2 late last year, but it never released. I think Apple's waiting to push out Siri 2.0 before they push any new devices that utilize Siri this much. However, we do expect a new HomePad-style device that's sort of a HomePod with a display on it, and that again would be later this year. But a new post by Kosutami on X has said that we might see a MagSafe-like snap-to-wall feature based on prototypes they've seen. So where we have MagSafe on the back of most of the iPhones, it would now be on the iPad and snap to the wall. So we could see something like that. However, we don't expect any devices to release until later this year, when they can fully incorporate Siri 2.0, probably with iOS 27. Many have also been asking me about maybe a new Apple TV, and we possibly could get one as soon as tomorrow since no one seemed to catch the AirPods Max 2. So we don't really know anything about that, but maybe we will see something like that released very soon. And maybe some people didn't catch it and it would be a bit of a surprise. And so that's everything this week so far for Apple News. Let me know what you're looking most forward to in the comments below. What do you think about iOS 27, if it's really just about stability? And also, are you planning to sort of hold out for maybe a new Ultra MacBook or something else? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.